So hello and welcome to this video on the Strange Science Instruments M-4 Advanced Stereo Mixer. Let's check out a little bit of what's to come before we get into the video. Now this is a seemingly simple 4-channel mixer, but they've called it an advanced stereo mixer. So why is it an advanced mixer? Well, we can audio rate modulate it for FM, we can patch feedback, we can create sends, we can take things in and out of the mix, bring them back into the pass-through. There's all sorts that we can actually do with this, and that's what I'm going to explore in this video. Turning this down, we simply have 4 channels. Input, direct output, which removes it from the mix, a pan CV, a volume CV, a switch that changes a linear or more dB relative scaling for the volume. That changes the CV response and the response of that volume knob. And then a pan knob, a volume, master volume, stereo out, a pass through, which I have some hi-hats playing through currently. And my output is going through this lovely Strange Science Instruments stereo filter. Let's just turn everything down, quickly go through what's actually happening here. I'm using it as a 6-channel mixer because I'm using the left and right pass-throughs as just mix inputs. Now granted, they're hard panned left and right, but you can make that work in a mix. So turning everything down, here's the start of that patch. 2 hi-hats. Then got kick and snare on channel 1, pre-mixed from a drum voice. A clap panned off left. Another little low end floor tommy kick type thing. And then this sound, which has sample and hold over its pan CV. And I'm using an envelope to control the level of that. Coming through this filter. There we have it, 6-channel mixer. Let's get stuck in. So in this patch, I'm going to walk through a couple of different tricks with a mixer, but mainly creating a send effect. So I first created a kick from an oscillating stereo filter, the Strange Science Instruments one, seems it was there. I've added some audio rate modulation to the panning to create a kind of stereo ring mod, and that's a nice little trick because it responds so well to audio rates, and we'll explore audio rate modulating this later, but it's nice to get this little overtone in there. And I have an envelope triggering at the same rate as what's modulating the filter to get the kick, but it's offbeat. So you can hear on that offbeat it's letting through this ring mod. It's pushing the level up, and the kind of bit of signal that's left from that filter, it's creating a kind of offbeat feel. Again, it's just another way to kind of impose another rhythm into what's otherwise a basic quarter note kick. Here's a nice kind of low pass gate bass line. And here's where I've created that send. You see I've got a stackable cable splitting my inputs to channel 2 and 3. Now channel 2, because I'm not coming out of the direct output, will just pass through to the mix out. Of course, with panning working in volume and so on. On the 3rd channel, I am coming out of the direct out into my effects unit, so this won't go through to the mix. I'm going mono out of this direct out into my effects and stereo back into this pass through, this unaffected left and right that just sums with the output of the mixer. So when I turn that channel up, I'm feeding this send. Now, of course, I can CV that, and I'm using this signal on data, this stepped random signal, to the volume control on channel 3. So that's varying the level from this kind of high quality VCA in this channel that's coming back out of its own direct out into the effect's fully wet output back to the pass-through. So we've got a nice dynamic stepped random CV control over the send. Channel 4 is just a little clicky thing. Simple LFO to pan CV, bringing in that kick again. That's how to create a send effect. Copy the channel over to the other channel with a stack cable, a passive or buffered multiple or a split cable. Take the direct out of the second channel that's split and use the volume or the CV to have a send effect that's CVable. The first channel goes to the mix, the other one comes out to your effect. So here I'm using just 2 sine waves to create some AM synthesis, some amplitude modulation synthesis. Unlike FM, which is more common, frequency modulation, where we modulate the frequency of an oscillator, AM modulates the amplitude. And I'm doing that here with the onboard VCAs on each channel. I'm also doing it dynamically, so if you listen to this patch, you'll note that you'll hear that some sounds are richer and not a sine wave, others are just a sine. That's this AM coming through, and I've got our send effect that I've created like in the previous patch. Let's go through what's going on. So the first channel here is my modulation, and that's the blue trace on the Modex data scope. If I turn that up, you can see it's a sine wave at a faster rate than my actual oscillator. Now I'm going to take out all the pitch sequencing from these 2 sine wave oscillators. And the green trace on data is my actual audio wave. So plugging that into channel 3, simple signal. Now I'm patching the direct output from the modulation channel back to the scope. And that's because I want to dynamically modulate the modulation. You may have heard this term modulating modulation or modulating modulators. That's what we're doing here. And I'm going to use an envelope signal to control the level of this modulating signal, come directly out to the scope so we can see it, and then modulate this channel with it. So you can see now this is a dynamic signal. Patching it back from the scope to voltage control this channel. There's the AM modulation, and the element of this that's dynamic is that the level of the modulator is changing, resulting in these bell-like overtones. And notice, unlike FM, the core pitch of this input wave isn't changing at all. It's just a series of overtones and harmonics that have been added by this AM synthesis. So on this channel now, channel 2, we have the droning wave being let through by the volume and the dynamic modulation. I'm going to patch that channel out into channel 3, and that's split into channel 4, which we'll come to as well. So there it is again. The reason for splitting it is I want another VCA, and because we've got a VCA per channel, I can then control the overall amplitude of everything on channel 3 with one more envelope. And if I change the envelope of the modulator, this one, which will change this blue modulation signal, we get little clicky pops, or more open modulation. The reason for splitting it is to create a send effect, taking the direct out of channel 4 to an effects chain. Have some modulation over the volume on channel 4, so it's a CV controlled send effect. Let's get the pitch signal back into the 2 sine wave oscillators. Let's quickly explore changing the waves. I'm going to keep the modulator a sine wave, but let's try some other waves for that green trace on data, the carrier, the kind of main tone. And there's some interesting dynamic accents with the AM over the saw wave. So here I'm using the M4 as a creative, performable, dynamic distortion unit. Now when testing this, well before turning the camera on, I was just throwing voltages in, high voltages, low voltages, audio rates, sub-audio rates, seeing how it responds, just testing the thing. It's part of what I do before I start to film the demos. And I noticed it's got this great kind of gluey, soft clip distortion to it. It's got a similar feel to a high-end desk where if pushed, it clips, but it's not a harsh clipping. It's kind of a nice soft saturation, and I'm squaring off my kick drum and kind of overloading that mix bus, if you like, and the rest of it is all kind of glued and distorted together. Now, you may notice this is going through the filter. I did just sweep that stereo filter, which sounds great. There is a saturation knob on this, but just to show that that's not where the saturation's coming from, let's route that straight into my output that I'm recording, just so you can hear it without any filtering, just the stereo output. But the patch started with a qubit scanned into the first channel. Simple LFO to the pan CV. Then I have a kick into this channel. Fairly simple 808 like kick, but pushing the level up full. You can just hear that kind of clipped hump through to overloaded mixer sound distortion. What I'd added to that though is a fast little envelope playing a completely different rhythm to the volume CV. And you can hear that clicking through now. Normally with the envelope to a VCA you'd expect a droning sound to go in, but because my sound's already shaped, it's already this quarter note bass drum pattern, it's cutting that sound in and out rhythmically, and when I drive that mixer channel, I'm getting this kind of hybrid superimposed rhythm over that quarter note kick. A bit of drive works really well, and mixing that against that qubit scanned on channel 1. It feels like there's a lot more going on than there really is. Now channel 2 is a simple kind of clicky snare. And there is some high-end whine on that. It's coming from the input, it's not coming from the module itself. That's really simple. And then I have this bit crushed, really quite high output, hi-hat sound going in to channel 3. But using a gate signal that I've offset and controlled externally, I'm simply cutting that in and out. Let's build the patch back up again. Change the response on the hats. A nice kind of crunchy mix. Bringing scan back in. All this character's coming from that kick drum kind of overloading its channel, kind of pushing this mix bus together. So here we're using the M4 as a complex CV routing tool, a kind of creative modulation hub, if you like. Just turning that back down. I have the blue LFO as my input on channel 1, this faster yellow LFO on channel 2. The green LFO that's moving slower is what's actually panning the first LFO around, and the slightly harder to see pinky purple one is what's panning channel 2 around. If I turn everything down except that first blue trace, this first LFO, that panning is routing the LFO on channel 1 to the left and the right, and these are modulating the left and the right filters. So grab some headphones if it's not really clear, but this LFO is panning, with a slower LFO doing the panning, between the left and the right filters. Now channel 2 is the faster LFO, and it's got an inverted version of that top one, again doing this panning. So you hear that emphasis shift between these two filters, and this filter has two different oscillators at the different inputs. In mono, here's some sample and hold. And I've got some noise on channel 4. So I can create a complex mix of stereo modulation, one LFO being panned around, a faster LFO on channel 2 being panned around, some sample and hold and some noise, routed to this stereo filter. And that master control is like a kind of master attenuator for the modulation going out of the left and the right sides. So there's a patch in the manual that suggests this being used as a sound design tool. Now I'd argue a lot of what I've done so far is a kind of sound design tool and approach, AM synthesis. I'm going to get onto some feedback shortly, routing CVs. But this patch specifically from the manual talks about modulating a sound with itself. So I have one sound on this green cable coming into this splitter, splitting off lots of versions of the same signal. So everything going into the M-4 is the same exact signal. If I turn up channel 2, we can see that I'm inputting a triangle wave. I could change that response or push this into clipping. Here it is on channel 1. Here's modulating the amplitude from itself. So triangle wave in, same triangle wave into the volume CV. Square it off, or almost kind of PWM it by moving the volume knob manually. The same signal to the pan CV. And you can see it's added this kind of wave-folded kink into the wave. This is just the left and the right outputs, I should say. Volume CV mod as well. So there's plenty of wave shaping. Now I'm going to change the actual input source to be a simple drum beat. Fairly simple, that's just on channel 2. Now here it is modulating its own amplitude, just the volume CV on channel 1. And we get like almost rectified type overtones. Let's add the pan CV back in as well. It's an interesting kind of distortion effect. So in this patch, we're going to look at feedback, and I'm really enjoying what the M-4 is kind of spitting back out at me with this feedback patch. But we'll start really basically. I've got a triangle wave on the first channel, so I'll turn that up. Quite a low pitch, almost fuzzy one from the source that I'm using. I'm coming out in mono, this purple cable. That's the green trace on data, and then this is what I'm recording as always. I'm patching the left output back in to channel 4, so there's my feedback path. Turning up channel 4, we can start to distort, clip, feedback this triangle on itself and create new wave shapes. Almost like a saw square hybrid. Now if I add a bit of folding to this triangle wave at the input, then do the feedback, it gets really gnarly. More folding. And because it's coming into a channel on this mixer, it's got VCAs on every channel. Well, there's 3 per channel, 1 for volume and 1 for each side of the pan. But let's plug a sample and hold into the volume CV. For like gnarly modern bass sound design, it's really cool. Just gonna edge the folding off on that triangle wave. Channels 2 and 3 are a kind of little noise hit type thing and a bass drum. The bass drum's the oscillating filter again. Simple enough, you can just clip it, get a bit of hair on it on that channel. And 2's this kind of high, I said noise thing, it's more like a snare, kind of little hit. Now with a dynamic source for feedback, let's bring it back on itself again and bring up that volume on channel 4. We get some pretty intense clipping. Right up to the point of actually creating oscillating drone-in tones. Again with some sample and hold over the level. And starting to feed some of that droning triangle in. Adding some folding to the triangle again. So go explore feedback, because it sounds killer. Feedback's something you should explore generally in synthesis, I think. It's a really great, organic, living kind of patch. Even, you know, standard feedback on a guitar, someone walking up to an amp and playing and mimicking their distance between the speaker and the pickups, or just a delay that's on the edge of oscillating. It's a really interesting kind of place to be sonically. So that's the M4 from Strange Science Instruments. Watch out for the video on the stereo filter coming fairly soon. Super high quality, it's felt great, it's rock solid, sound of it's good, audio CV, all those patch examples, I hope they've been useful. Hit like, comment, subscribe, go to patreon.com/DivKid to support the work that I do. If not, be nice and give the video a thumbs up. Cheers for watching.